There's a trader sitting in front of three monitors right now. Markets are moving fast, red candles stacking, the position is bleeding. And while most people in that situation would feel their chest tighten, their breath shorten, their finger hovering over the exit button with pure panic, this trader feels almost nothing. Calm, calculated, locked in. And here's what's strange. That trader didn't get that way through years of meditation. They didn't read every trading psychology book on the market. They didn't have a coach or a mentor walking them through breathwork exercises. They got that way because of where they came from, because of what they survived, because chaos, real chaos, was their childhood. And that changes everything about how a person trades. Now, here's where it gets complicated, because that exact same background, growing up in instability, in unpredictability, in environments where the rules changed without warning, that same background that can produce an ice-cold, unshakable trader under pressure can also produce the most self-destructive, compulsive, emotionally erratic trader you've ever seen. Same psychology, same roots, two completely opposite outcomes. And today, we're going to break down exactly why. We're going to go deep into the psychology of traders who grew up in chaos, what that background rewires in the brain, how it shows up in trading behavior, why it can be both the greatest advantage and the most dangerous liability in the market, and most importantly, what you can actually do with this information, whether you grew up in chaos or not. Because the truth is, the market doesn't care about your childhood, but your childhood cares deeply about how you trade. Let's get into it.
Point 1. Chaos childhood rewires the nervous system, and the market knows it. Here's something most trading educators will never tell you. Your nervous system was trained before you ever placed your first trade. Long before you knew what a candlestick was, long before you understood bid and ask, your brain was already building its operating system. And that operating system was shaped almost entirely by your early environment. When psychologists study people who grew up in unpredictable, unstable, or chaotic households, whether that was financial instability, emotional volatility, conflict, addiction in the home, sudden moves, loss, or just a general sense that things could fall apart at any moment, they find something remarkable. These individuals develop what researchers call a hyper-vigilant threat detection system. What does that mean in plain language? It means their brains learned, at a very young age, to scan constantly for danger, to read the room before anyone else, to notice micro-signals, a shift in tone, a change in energy, a subtle sign that something is about to go wrong, faster and more accurately than people who grew up in stable environments. That's not a disadvantage. In the market, that's an extraordinary skill. Think about what reading price action actually requires. You're watching subtle shifts. You're sensing when momentum is losing strength before the candle even closes. You're picking up on the energy of a move, whether it has conviction behind it or whether it's running out of steam.
Traders who grew up in chaos are often doing this naturally. They've been trained their entire lives to read environments that don't make sense to other people. But here's the other side of that coin. That same hyper-vigilant system, the one that kept them safe as children, doesn't always know when to turn off. In a trading context, hypervigilance can look like this. You see a setup. It's clean. Your system says enter, but you hesitate because something feels off. Something in the chart doesn't feel right. And you wait, and you wait, and the trade runs without you. Or the opposite happens. You enter a trade and immediately your nervous system starts firing. It reads every red tick as a threat signal, every pullback as a disaster incoming. And you exit early, not because your system told you to, but because your body couldn't handle the discomfort. Psychologists call this a trauma response. Traders call it emotional trading. They're the same thing. So the first thing to understand about traders who grew up in chaos is this. They are often the most naturally gifted readers of market energy, and simultaneously the most vulnerable to being hijacked by their own nervous system at the worst possible moments. The skill and the wound come from the same place. And that's what makes this so difficult to navigate.
Point 2. The comfort with uncertainty. The superpower most traders never develop. Let me ask you something. What's the number one reason most traders fail? You might say it's strategy, risk management, not following the rules. And yes, those matter. But underneath all of those things, underneath every blown account, every revenge trade, every over-leveraged position, there is one core psychological problem: an inability to sit with uncertainty. The market is, by definition, uncertain. You never know what the next candle will be. You never know if this setup, even a perfect setup, will work this time. You never know if your stop will hold or if price will slice right through it and keep going. Most people cannot accept that uncertainty. It creates anxiety. It creates a need to control. And that need to control leads to all the destructive behaviors we know: moving stops, adding to losing positions, overtrading, forcing setups. Now, here's what's fascinating about traders who grew up in chaos. Uncertainty isn't foreign to them. Uncertainty is home. They spent years, sometimes decades, living in environments where tomorrow wasn't guaranteed, where plans changed without notice, where stability was a luxury they didn't have. And somewhere along the way, their brain adapted. It learned to function inside uncertainty. Not just tolerate it, function inside it. This is one of the most clinically documented psychological adaptations among individuals from high adversity backgrounds. Researchers in resilience psychology call it uncertainty tolerance. And it turns out that people who developed this trait through difficult early environments score significantly higher on it than those who grew up in predictable, low-stress households. In trading terms, this translates to something specific. It means these traders can hold a position through normal drawdown without panicking. They can watch a trade go against them temporarily without catastrophizing. They can sit in the discomfort of not knowing the outcome and still execute with discipline. Most traders spend years trying to develop this. Most never fully get there. But for someone who grew up in chaos, this capacity is already built in. The problem? Comfort with uncertainty can also become an addiction to uncertainty. There are traders who don't just tolerate chaos, they need it. They become bored during low volatility periods. They start forcing trades during choppy, unclear market conditions because calm markets don't activate them the way volatile ones do. They need the adrenaline, the spike, the heart rate elevation of a big move, because that's when they feel most alive. And this is where the superpower becomes a trap. Because profitable trading is mostly boring. It's waiting. It's letting the market come to you. It's doing nothing when there's nothing to do. And for someone whose nervous system was trained to seek stimulation and respond to chaos, doing nothing can feel like dying. This is why you'll see traders who are phenomenal at reading fast markets, news events, high volatility sessions, and completely unable to stay disciplined during quiet, consolidating markets. They're not undisciplined in general. They're just hardwired for a specific type of market that matches their internal rhythm. Understanding this about yourself is not a small thing. It can completely change how you structure your trading, when you trade, what you trade, how you manage your time in front of the charts. Because the goal isn't to fight your wiring. The goal is to understand it well enough to work with it and build guardrails around the parts that can destroy you. Point 3. The control paradox. Why chaos backgrounds create both masters and disasters of risk. Here's a pattern that shows up over and over again in traders from chaotic backgrounds. And it looks like a contradiction until you understand the psychology. On one side, you have traders who are exceptional at risk management, ruthless even. They cut losses fast. They don't add to losers. They protect their capital like it's the most important thing in the world. Because somewhere in their subconscious, it is. Money represents safety. Capital is security. Losing it means going back to a place they never want to go again. On the other side, you have traders who are catastrophically bad at risk management, who blow accounts, who go all in on trades with no logical explanation, who take risks that make no rational sense at all. And here's the thing. Both of these traders might have grown up in the same type of environment. So what's the difference? The difference is what they learned about control. Psychologists who study adverse childhood experiences, commonly referred to as ACEs, have identified that individuals from chaotic backgrounds develop fundamentally different relationships with the concept of control. Some learn that control is essential to survival. They become rigidly rule-bound, structured, almost obsessive about managing variables and reducing uncertainty, because that's how they survived, by controlling what they could in an uncontrollable environment. Others learned the opposite. They learned as children that control was an illusion, that no matter what they did, the chaos would come, that planning was pointless because everything could fall apart anyway. And so they gave up on control. They adopted a kind of reckless surrender to whatever happens, and that showed up in risk-taking behavior that had no logic behind it, only impulse.
In trading, the first type often becomes an excellent risk manager, but a poor profit taker. They protect themselves so aggressively that they cut winners too early and never let trades breathe. They mistake caution for discipline. The second type often starts strong because early wins feel like confirmation that their impulse-driven style works. But it doesn't take long before the market finds them. And when it does, they have no real system to fall back on, just instinct. And instinct without structure in trading is just gambling with extra steps. Now, here's the critical insight, and I want you to really hear this. Neither response is irrational. Both were learned. Both made sense in the context where they developed. Both were survival strategies. But survival strategies are not the same as trading strategies. And one of the most profound shifts any trader from a chaotic background can make is recognizing the moment they stop trading the market and start trading their past. Because when you're in that trade, when price is moving and your heart is pounding and you're making decisions in real time, your conscious mind thinks it's responding to the chart. But often, it's responding to something that happened 20 years ago in a house that no longer exists. That's the control paradox, and becoming aware of it is the beginning of real mastery.
Point 4. Emotional intelligence as a trading edge, the hidden advantage nobody talks about. Let's talk about something that rarely comes up in trading education. Emotional intelligence. Not just managing your own emotions, which is obviously important, but the ability to read the emotional state of the market itself, to feel the sentiment behind the price, to sense whether buyers are genuinely committed or just testing levels, to know when the crowd is afraid and when they're greedy, not just because an indicator told you, but because you can feel it in the data. This is one of the most underrated edges in trading. And traders who grew up in chaotic environments, particularly those with emotionally volatile parents or caregivers, often develop this skill at an unusually high level. Here's why. When you grow up in an unpredictable emotional environment, your brain does something remarkable. It becomes extraordinarily sensitive to emotional cues. It learns to track mood shifts, tension levels, escalating patterns, all to keep you safe, to give you enough warning to prepare for what's coming. Psychologists call this emotional attunement. It's an advanced form of empathy that goes beyond just understanding how someone else feels. It's an almost real-time read of the emotional temperature of a situation. And when you take that capacity into a trading environment, something interesting happens. You start to read market psychology the way other people read charts. You notice when a breakout has genuine emotion behind it and when it's faking. You sense when a sell-off is panic-driven and likely to recover versus when it's something more structural. You feel, not just see, when sentiment is shifting. This is what experienced traders call reading the tape. And while there are technical ways to develop this skill, some traders come to it naturally because their nervous system has been trained for it their entire lives. Now, here's the other edge of this blade. High emotional attunement doesn't just make you sensitive to market emotion, it makes you susceptible to market emotion. There's a phenomenon in trading psychology called emotional contagion, the tendency to absorb and mirror the emotional state of your surrounding environment. In everyday life, this is why you feel anxious when you're around anxious people, or calm when you're around calm ones. In trading, this means highly emotionally attuned traders can get pulled into the fear of a sell-off or the euphoria of a breakout, not because they made a logical decision to react, but because they were overwhelmed by the emotional energy of the move. They feel what the crowd feels, and then they act with the crowd at exactly the wrong time. This is why emotional intelligence as a trader requires a very specific discipline, not the suppression of emotion. That doesn't work and creates other problems, but the ability to observe the emotion, name it, and consciously choose whether or not to act on it. The technical term in psychology is emotional regulation, and it is, without question, one of the most powerful skills any human being can develop, in trading or in life. For traders who grew up in chaos, this skill is often both overdeveloped and underdeveloped at the same time, depending on the specific nature of their experience. And identifying where you fall on that spectrum is not a small thing. It can quite literally be the difference between consistent profitability and perpetual emotional trading.
Point 5. The identity problem. When trading becomes a stage for old wounds. This is the deepest point we're going to go to today, and it might be the most important one. One of the most painful and persistent patterns in traders from chaotic backgrounds is this. They use trading to resolve psychological wounds that have nothing to do with trading. Let me explain what that means. When you grow up in an environment where chaos was the norm, certain psychological needs often go unmet. The need for safety, the need for control, the need for validation, the need to prove yourself, the need to feel powerful, capable, competent, because for so long you felt small and powerless. Those needs don't disappear when you become an adult. They go underground. And then they find new arenas to play out in. For some people, it's relationships. For others, it's work. For a significant number of people, it's trading. Think about what trading offers, psychologically speaking. It offers the feeling of control. You choose when to enter, when to exit, how much risk to take. It offers the feeling of power. A big win can feel like finally proving to the world, or to some inner critic, that you're not the mess you used to be. It offers the feeling of validation. A profitable month feels like evidence that you are smart, capable, and worthy. And it offers the rush. The same neurological spike that chaotic environments once produced, now available on demand through a trading platform open 24 hours a day. Do you see where this is going? When trading becomes the arena where you fight your childhood battles, the market transforms from a financial instrument into a psychological battlefield. And the rules of that battlefield are not found in any trading book. You start trading not to make money, but to feel something, to prove something, to punish yourself, to escape, to feel alive. And the market, as always, is ruthless to traders who are there for the wrong reasons. This is why you see incredibly intelligent, disciplined people repeatedly blow accounts. Why someone can follow their system perfectly in a demo account and fall apart with real money. Why a trader can have a great week and then inexplicably self-sabotage on Friday afternoon. Because they're not just trading. They're working out something much older and much deeper than any market structure could ever contain. The psychologist Mark Douglas, who spent decades studying trader psychology, described this phenomenon in a different way. He talked about the idea that most traders carry a set of beliefs about themselves and about money that were formed long before they ever placed a trade. And those beliefs silently govern every decision they make, often in direct opposition to what their system is telling them to do. When a trader from a chaotic background tells themselves, consciously or not, that they don't deserve consistent success, that good things always fall apart, that they're not the kind of person who gets to have financial stability, that belief will find a way to manifest in their trading. Every time. Not because the market punishes them, but because they punish themselves through the market. Breaking this pattern requires something most trading courses never teach. It requires real self-awareness. Not just knowing your entry rules, but knowing your emotional triggers. Not just reviewing your trades, but reviewing your reactions to your trades. understanding what you're actually feeling in the moments before, during, and after you execute, and asking yourself honestly, am I responding to the market or am I responding to something inside me? This is the work that separates traders who eventually find consistency from traders who remain stuck, not for lack of strategy, but for lack of self-knowledge. And if any of this is resonating with you right now, if you recognized yourself in any of these patterns, I want you to hear something clearly. This is not a character flaw. This is not a trading flaw. This is a human pattern rooted in real experience that can be understood, worked with, and over time transformed.
Closing, the integration, turning chaos into capital. So let's bring this all together. We've talked about 5 deep psychological patterns that emerge in traders who grew up in chaos. The hypervigilant nervous system that can read the market like no one else, and that can also sabotage entries and exits with its own alarm signals. The extraordinary comfort with uncertainty that makes sitting in trades possible, and that can turn into an addiction to volatility and a need for chaos to feel alive. The control paradox, where some become masters of risk management and others become compulsive risk takers, both driven by the same childhood wound, just processed in opposite directions. The emotional intelligence that can read market sentiment with almost preternatural accuracy, and that can also lead to emotional contagion, absorbing the crowd's panic or greed at exactly the wrong moment. And the identity problem, the deepest and most powerful pattern of all, where trading becomes the stage for psychological battles that have nothing to do with price action and everything to do with the story someone is still carrying about who they are. Here's what I want to leave you with. The market doesn't care about your past, but your past cares very much about your market. And the traders who truly break through, who find that rare combination of psychological stability and strategic clarity, are not the ones who had the easiest lives. They're often not the ones who grew up with stability and predictability and emotional safety.
They're the ones who looked honestly at what their background gave them, the gifts and the wounds together, and chose to do the hard work of integrating both. Because the goal is not to erase your history. The goal is to stop being unconsciously governed by it. Every trader has a psychological edge, and every trader has a psychological liability. The ones who make it are the ones who know the difference, who lean deliberately into their strengths and put real guardrails around their vulnerabilities. If you grew up in chaos and you're in this market, you are not at a disadvantage. You have been trained in many ways for this environment. But you have to be conscious about it, intentional about it. Because the same wiring that makes you capable of extraordinary things in this market can, without awareness, drive you straight into the ground. Know your system. But more than that, know yourself. Trade the market, not your past. If this video hit something in you, if you recognized yourself in any of these patterns, I want to know about it in the comments. Because this conversation matters. This is the work that most trading education skips entirely. And the more we talk about it, the more traders actually find their way through. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because this is the kind of content we make here. Deep, honest, grounded in real psychology, not surface-level motivation. We're not here to hype you up. We're here to help you actually understand yourself as a trader. And that understanding, that's where everything changes. See you in the next one.